What's up, everyone? Today we are joined once again by Daniel José Older, the author of the new book Midnight Horizon and the High Republic Adventures and Edge of Balance Volume 2 and Trail of Shadows. So many High Republic things, and that's just what you have coming out right now in Wave 2 or Wave 3 of Phase 1 of the High Republic. So, how are you handling all that? Like, when do you sleep?
I sleep at night, best I can, and then I in the daytime I write. But no, it is a lot, and it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun. I think the answer to like all of those questions is kind of like we all just love it so much, and we have such a good time. I love having conversations like this, and so even the promo is fun. It is exhausting, and we do still have to. It's almost more dangerous when you love it because that's when you don't see burnout creep up on you.
Mm.
Like when you hate your job, you hate it. Like when you're burning out, you hate it even more. When you love your job, you love it and you love it and you don't realize it because you're doing so much, and then suddenly you wake up one day or you're in the middle of doing something and everything just goes static. You're just like, where's my brain? And so it'll creep up. As much as I've gotten good at like checking myself and figuring out when I'm sort of getting to that edge of burnout, it'll still sometimes catch me by surprise, and that's when it can be dangerous.
Yeah, man, you're so right. There are days where, especially with like the Book of Boba Fett out, I'll just be talking about Star Wars for 12 hours straight, and then I'll be like, "Why am I so exhausted and my brain is fried?" And my wife Molly is like, "Well, you just worked for 12 hours and you
Right,
didn't really even notice it."
right. Is this your full time gig?
Yeah,
Wow, that's so cool.
it's super fun, but like you said, yeah, burnout can creep up.
It can creep up, and that it's dangerous. And I've been doing this for a while now. And I still, I feel like that's one of the biggest things I try to teach young writers or up and coming writers is like learn how to check in with yourself and figure out like what are the signs, because sometimes it'll show up in ways you don't expect. But if you get good at being like, oh, that's burnout, you can kind of catch it. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I'll
A
try
good
to get
problem
better
to have,
about that.
it's still a problem.
Well, with so many stories coming out in the High Republic right now, and they're all in like different kinds of media, how do you balance all of that? And not just between like this one's a comic and this one's a manga and this one's a young adult book, but you're also writing between a bunch of different audiences and like age levels. How do
Right.
you do all of that at the same time?
Um, I always come back. Since we're talking about Midnight Horizon, there's a kind of ongoing theme in Midnight Horizon that mostly is Kantam trying to bring this message home for all the Padawans to be like, the most important thing is the thing that's right in front of you, right? And like they remember sometimes that they had taught them that. And it's just such an important lesson for a writer, for a creative person, for someone going through any kind of difficult stuff. It's like you have to come back to the present, and whatever you're doing has to be the most important thing to you right then. And that might mean, it means different things for different projects, right? Like it might mean you have to leave your phone in a different room, like just basic stuff like that, right? It might mean that you have a soundtrack that you like listen to that really grounds you in whatever you're doing. And there's tons of different techniques, but the point is you have to figure out which one is going to work for you for each project and do that. But when it comes to age, I think at this point for myself, I've just really clicked into each one and who I'm writing for. So it feels very natural. It doesn't take a lot of like extra work to be like, oh, I gotta switch over modes now, right? Like I know when I'm writing adventures, I know who my audience is. I've been doing it for the past year and a half, so it's very clear in my head. Like this is for the kids. At least this has to be kid appropriate, right? Whereas
Right.
as soon as I'm in Trail of Shadows, I'm like, oh boy, no kids here. We get to whatever,
That's interesting that you bring up kind of Cantum's theme. They have that message of what's right in front of you. And do you all discuss consistent themes for waves? Because I kind of noticed that in all three of those books, where in the Fallen Star with Starlight Beacon falling, all of the Jedi have to focus on the problem they can solve at this one time instead of kind of like focusing on the whole thing. That's so overwhelming. And then you have Renestra in Mission to Disaster, and she is focusing on solving the problems in front of her when she's really worried about
right.
Avon and what's going on there. Is that just something that coincidentally happened?
Yes. We do a lot of coordinating, but we can't coordinate everything. And I think thematically, that's definitely something that we don't intentionally get too into. It's also just that like that's such a sort of particular level of creative process that usually comes up in very personal ways or particular ways for each writer as we go. I definitely didn't go into Midnight Horizon being like the theme of like presentness and nowness is definitely going to be a thing. That kind of came up naturally through the book. So it worked out in a very harmonious way with all the other books, but a lot of that is just the force.
Yeah. Uh, well, let's see. You talked about Trail of Shadows already a little bit, and the noir genre can be pretty adult and dark. Has that been challenging at all to adapt that into Star Wars?
Just fun, really. It's like so cool, especially the whole theme for me of this whole end of phase one has been balance. And that's true in the work itself. Balance is such a big part of Midnight Horizon, especially, but also just for myself, right? And so balancing the work for the kids to the work for the adults, and all ages it's a good term in a way because a lot of my readers are adults, and especially the ones I interact with the most are teenagers or adults on Twitter, but a whole lot of those readers who I don't interact with are little kids, and it's really important for me to always check in and keep that in mind. Like I know some of them because they're in my family, but for the most part, they're not on Twitter, which is good. And so I do have to remind myself, like, okay, this is for the this should be like very readable and engaging for adults, but I always have to keep in mind that the first and foremost readers in my mind have to be the young people, the young people. And you'll see that a little bit as we get to the end of that run without spoiling it. Those are the readers I kept the most in mind as we wrapped up, as I was trying to figure out what beat to land on and what was going to really make sense to people. I really wanted to focus mostly on people who were only reading and people who were young readers just reading the adventures. And the other folks, they can get what information they need from the other stuff that I'm also working on anyway.
Yeah. I really loved issue 4, which just came out, and Emmerich has a little run-in with one of the levelers, which was just sick. And I don't really have a question about that, but I do want to talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it because it was a lot to talk about. It was an
I love the way that it happened, where he gets into the ship and then is immediately like something's wrong, and anyone who's read The Fallen Star is like, oh no.
Yeah. And that's what's sort of so cool is like about having all this work be in conversation and Trail of Shadows in particular, because it's kind of like it came after so much stuff was already written. I was really able to like sort of enter into these points of different like touch points, I think, throughout the initiative, starting obviously with, Loden, which is such a profound beat to land on at the end of The Rising Storm. And I wanted this comic to really be in conversation with that beat and to give readers a moment to kind of like react to it. I love that the book ends that way, by the way. That is perfect. And it's really fun to take that moment and then be like, now here come what happened immediately after that. Emmerich showed up, right? And then like it led off into this whole other direction that now we get to follow. And that's also going to be true as we move forward with The Fallen Star, which is really fun.
It's been like one of the big surprises. It seems like they just kind of announced Trail of Shadows out of the blue, and then
Right.
getting into it has been so cool. It's
You
been
ever
one of my
think we see Chad in canon? Like, first of all, I didn't realize it was called Chad until I looked it up and found out that the Chadra are from a planet called Chad. It sounds like like a volleyball player. You know what I mean? But
It's all the Chadra fan are just super bros.
it's just like, yeah, this is awesome, bro. No, but it was so much fun to like get to explore that planet a little bit and get a little deeper into Chadra fan life and all that. That's so weird. But yeah.
Well, I think you've probably all of the Luminous writers at one point have probably been asked, like, how would you see the Force since
Ooh.
you've kind of introduced that idea. But I'm curious, what do you think you would see if you had a leveler nearby? Because that image for Emmerich was horrifying.
It was so horrifying, right? And I love that exactly what you touched on. Like we've been talking all this time about how different people, how different Jedi see the Force, but like now we have the anti version of that, which is like it somehow digs up all these fears and fearful memories. That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that for myself. I have no idea. I'm gonna have to think about it.
That's
But it's terrifying. I love that page so much. He's just like, what? And it's
and
such a
that's supposed to be his nanny, right? Like his
yes.
childhood nanny. Yeah. I
There's a
really loved that. Yeah.
terrible taste in
And and how, like you said, every Jedi kind of experiences it differently. Because I
Mm,
remember Bell, when he experiences it in the Rising Storm, it's like falling. That's the sudden sensation he felt. So it's like it's really fun to try to dig into what is happening with the leveler. But I won't press you on that too much.
thank you.
Uh,
I will say
uh,
it's a really fun thing to be able to play with visually, and we do that, more so going ahead. And you've seen that with Cav's work and the Marvel too, with Keeve and them getting into it, and so it's exciting. It's really fun storytelling messiness.
on the flip side, like on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, what sparks an idea like the Great Galactic Bake Off Spectacular?
Man, it all started with like literally just that offhand comment when Yoda shows up with baked goods, and he's like, "Brought you delicious baked goods, have I?" It was really just to make Zine feel at home and feel loved and protected in this new place, and in the midst of her, like probably one of the worst moments of her life, and losing her friend and her home and everything else. I just wanted to show how welcoming this place was, and what better way to do it than Yoda showing up with baked goods, right? And then it became like a way to just kind of build the culture of Starlight. So much of the work of adventures all the way through, and up to, and very much including the Bake Off and the Great Jedi Rumble race. It's so much about just building up this community and showing like just what a loved home it is for people. In part because yes, like we all know it's falling, and that part of sort of brings it home emotionally, but also just to just make it matter as a location beyond just being like a symbol of the Galactic Republic and all this other stuff, which is cool, but it has to feel lived in. It has to feel like a home, and the Padawans are the best sort of way to do that, I think. So yeah, it started as just a offhand comment, and then I would have different little opportunities to throw it in there throughout the run over the next couple of issues. The different characters are baking, and I think we all want to see, like, love thinking about the Jedi as doing things beyond just like fighting bad guys, right? And this is such a cool way to do that. And then it was really Mike Siglain who I think pitched it to IDW as doing like a one shot. And I was like, oh yeah, definitely, like, so Vita and I got together and did it, and we had a lot of fun.
I think there was a line in the Midnight Horizon where Ram says that he once saw Kantam and Buckets of Blood, and they were meditating, supposedly preparing for what's to come ahead. And in my mind, I immediately was like, "Is that the Bake Off? Are they preparing for
No,
the Bake Off?"
that's from the issue right before it, when they first get back from all their different adventures, and they walk into the meditation room, or the strategy room, and Kantam and Buckets are like doing this, like, not exactly a force link, but they're like, in that deep meditative state with each other.
I like to imagine that they do it before they do anything,
Baking
including
too. Like,
baking.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, look, if you go bake with somebody, you might as well do a force link.
In my fandom, I wouldn't normally call myself much of a shipper, but you really won me over with both Lula and Zine, and Emmerich and Cyan. So, who's your favorite ship in the High Republic?
It's definitely Lula and Zine, mostly because I literally wrote a memo at the beginning of all of this to Mike and Pablo and like some other folks on Story, outlining what I wanted to do with them in the long term. And one line in the memo goes, hopefully by around, wave 3 of phase 1, everyone will be shipping them when we finally reveal that they've been in love this whole time, and they've been gradually falling in love. And the fact that that paid off, I got to say, it feels really, really good. Like, people are actually shipping them, because there's certainly a world where people are just like, oh, they're cool, they're friends, whatever. And then it's like, oh, and then they're in love, and they're like, cool, oh, that's not, like, people really are invested in them. And that means so much to me, because I'm invested in them, because I love them like daughters, and I created them, and because, like, it's, narratively, like, what I planned did, like, work. And that's amazing to me. Like, even, I don't know, it's just so cool to behold it, and to see the fan reaction, the reader reaction, to see like the art and that has come out of it, and the excitement and the memes and everything else. Like, there's just nothing like that. And then I also just really love them, and I love them as a model of like what it looks like to come out of a really bad situation and get into a really good one. And it doesn't mean it's without strife or without tension, obviously, but I just want to see more of that in media and in the world because it's so common. Young people especially are just constantly in and out of, different situations, be they relationships or family situations or whatever. And, there's just very little like guidelines, or not guidelines, but like there's no map, and young people, I just want them to have more of a language through media, through fantasy, through characters that they care about to like talk about what it means to feel disempowered by someone that's supposed to care for you. Someone, that loves you, but on a condition of like you not really being your full self. Like that's such a common thing. It's such a dangerous thing. And I just wanted to see it more. So that's what I wrote.
Yeah. I mean, that was apparent from issue 1 of Adventures. And I think you've got so many great messages for the people who are reading High Republic Adventures or the young adult books, where I really connected with, and I'm in my 30s, where I connected with kind of what Ram and Reath were going through, and just not really feeling like they used to. And I'm like, anyone stuck in going through this pandemic is probably feeling something like that, especially young people. So I was over there, yeah, fully connecting with them and what they what they have to go through in Midnight Horizon.
I mean, I'm in my 40s and I was too. So, so I guess I did something right. But most importantly, of course, it's like the young people doing it. But like I said earlier, like those moments should really hit across age groups, but definitely in different ways. And that's when it's working.
Yeah, I one of my favorite memories in my fandom is actually when I was interviewing Claudia Gray years ago at Dragon Con, and she just explained what YA meant for real. And it's like, yeah, these books are for everyone. It just they happen to be about young adults becoming adults and growing up. And I was like, oh, like that. I just never really understood that. But yeah, the messages are still for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think, and also like, because for me, like, right, like books are about turning points, right? Every book is about a turning point. And if you have multiple characters, like we do in so many of our Star Wars books, it's always going to be about these multiple turning points. Each of them is going to go through different things that change them. But when you're talking about a young adult book, very specifically, like you're always talking about this journey that brings them some steps closer to adulthood on some level, and that always involves leaving behind some of the mythologies that we carry with us from childhood. And that's like heartbreaking and also very exciting and inspiring all at the same time, which is why it makes for such good literature, right? But it's also that we're always growing. I certainly haven't stopped growing and learning just because I'm 42 recently. There's so much more ahead, and there's so much learning to do, and that's what makes life awesome and really hard. And so, I certainly read YA books, and I'm like, oh man, I know that's about being 18, but it also is about being 40 on some level. And you find the things that you connect to and you run with them.
Well, that's a great segue into talking a little more closely about Midnight Horizon, which recently came out, at least when this interview comes out.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed watching, especially Ram grow up in that book. I felt like, I think I made this assumption that when he started in this book, he would just automatically be aged up out of like the middle grade kind of writing. But I was like, no, he is the same kid. And I loved that. And then I felt like I got to kind of watch him grow up through, everything he has to endure.
Totally.
Was there any surprising difference when you were bringing Ram and Zine and Lula and all those younger characters into a story where they are aging up into closer to adulthood?
Totally. With Ram, it's such an interesting one because you're absolutely right. Like he's that same kid, but he's also been through these like however many months of battle, right? Which is different than what we know him, but he still is that kid. And so the challenge was being like, what is different about him and what is the same about him? The voice of Ram is always there because I created Ram and he's very easy to tap into for me for whatever reason. But I wanted to start him off from a point that kind of acknowledged all he'd been through since we last left him in Race to Crash Point Tower, which is a lot. It's a lot of life-changing events that he's dealt with, but also set him up to go even further and go to the next place. So I didn't really know where he was going to end up, but I knew I wanted to start with him feeling that sense of just emptiness. And that, I guess, to your earlier question, is almost another thematic thing that happened without me meaning to, because I didn't realize how deeply Claudia was going to touch on the emptiness that the leveler causes with someone who has the force, right? He's not feeling that. That's before the leveler is anywhere near Starlight. But what he is feeling is trauma, and having lived through battle and grown up not living through battle and then suddenly be thrust into it, it's hard, And one of the ways that people deal with it is by shutting down all their emotions when they feel like they can't have any kind of access to them or any control over them, right? So he's going through that and he doesn't know why, he doesn't really understand it, and he's like, I know we're supposed to be detached, but this is a little too much. This is a lot. So then it becomes ultimately a question of balance. And that's what I wanted to go through with him, is have him swing back and forth radically between these different emotions and, really accept all of them, but also like use them to find balance. And I think like that conversation with Reath that he has during the gala, that's like so devastating, because people are just, the starlight is crashing and people are seeing it on the hollow and they're so far away and they're surrounded by people that don't care and don't acknowledge the depth of it and are possibly responsible for it, right? And just the rage that he feels. That's such an important, I think that's one of the most important emotional moments for me in the book. Because he has to feel that. He can't not feel that. And it's not the Jedi way to be like, you feel nothing, right? Like, that's not actually a good Jedi. But the idea that to find balance, you actually have to go to either side a little bit too far to learn what the center is. Like we see that come up again and again. Zine realizes that in the comic and in the book itself. And, I just wanted them to have relationships with each other that involved acknowledging their emotions and dealing with them instead of just suppressing them and pushing them away.
Yeah, that moment is definitely the big one where I feel like that book, it starts out with so much fun, so many shenanigans, and there's tomfoolery. And I was like, yeah,
Right.
it feels like the High Republic Adventures or
Right.
Race to Crash Point Tower. And then you hit that moment, and the rest of the book is more like reading The Rising Storm,
Right.
where it's just
Was like,
what
oh,
is
God.
happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I also wanted to do was have that feeling, but also have it be like these Jedi are all collectively kind of at their rope's end in terms of their response. And, they're really recognizing in different ways across the board, each character has to recognize that they're at war and that they cannot continue to just be like, well, hopefully we'll get attacked so we can attack back. You know what I mean? Like they are just at a point where like it is war and they have to reconcile that with their belief, in like not being the aggressor. And you see very literally, you see Comac and Kantam going back and forth about that. And, what does that mean? What is our response? And all of that. It brings up all those questions. But my hope is that it also like ends on a way where it feels victorious, even amidst so much death and destruction, in a way that doesn't like take away their essential who they are, right?
Yeah. I would say that you you achieved that. I won't go into why for
Right,
spoiler reasons, but
right.
I really like the way that book ended.
Good. Me too.
What do you think has been kind of the biggest challenge for all of you as you close out phase one, other than
Mm.
your insane workload?
Yeah, well, coordinating is always really hard. It's really fun and it's really hard. It's great that we all like trust and know each other so well at this point. We're all actually friends. I think that makes it a lot easier, but it's still really hard. So what I found out was that coordinating is even hard when you're doing it with yourself, which I wasn't expecting. Because I went into this being like, all right, Cav and I, like it was a struggle, but we did it. It was a challenge, a good challenge, but we got it done with Crash Point Tower and
Mhm.
Rising Storm. I was like, I'm going to do it with myself in this because I have this unprecedented opportunity to have overlapping, time situations going on between the comic and the novel, and it's going to be great. And it's even going to be easier because I don't have to worry about, time zones in the UK. Turns out comics are really hard to coordinate with, and it's just hard to coordinate, period. So I was still finding like mistakes and continuity errors and stuff in stuff that I was coordinating with my own work. I was like,
Yeah.
"Ah!" But if anything, I think this job teaches you how to not be a perfectionist because you cannot be a perfectionist. And like in the true Jedi fashion, you have to let go a little bit and detach and just do your best and kind of like flow with it, which I'm pretty good at most of the time. But it is
Well, someone whose basic job is to like keep up with everything and notice errors and then rationalize them, that nothing jumped out at me. So I think
Dude.
you're all right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You do that. That's the other thing. It's a fandom that is extremely invested in like things lining up. And you know, it's fine and understandable. I am too as a fan. But that makes it even more like, oh man, I gotta get this right.
I always view it that it's like it's so much fun when it works out, but like if there's ever little things here or there, it's like it's all good. So
And what's cool is like I was really excited to know that certain scenes I was writing, I was going to get to see Harvey draw them, and Harvey is such a god of art that it just made it really exciting for me because the book is very visual, and the action of it is extremely visual, and there's so much I just wanted to see when I was writing it, and you rarely get to see that as a novelist. You just kind of have to deal with the fact that you're probably not going to see it. So with this, I was like, "Ooh, I know some of these moments are going to come up in the comic, and it's going to be great." And it is. There's still one or two more scenes ahead that we get to see from the book, so I'm very excited about that.
Speaking of coordinating, I think on a sci-fi.com interview recently, Claudia Gray mentioned her process and talking about Stellan Gios and his death coming up while she was writing it. And I'm just curious, like, how do you all handle that? Does everyone take a vote? When does she approach you with this idea and everyone does this or this to Stellan? Like,
Depends on the character and the situation. So kind of, definitely like a death as big as that. We are all complicit in. I think it's the best thing. Like, no one has clean hands when it comes to the larger character deaths. When it's more like, you know, if one of our more kind of like our characters, it would probably be like a little less democratic, I guess you could say. There isn't a tried and true method is the long answer of it, but there is a lot of conversation about it, and we do all like share input across the board. So it's really interesting. I've never been in a creative process like this. I think it's very rare, and it's really cool because you know it really is a mind meld, you know, and you really are all putting your heads together. And again, to the point of the idea of detachment and letting go, like you have to enter into all of it, all Star Wars as a writer, just being like, some of this is going to happen and some of it isn't, you know, like I think this is more so with this project. I've certainly felt more like I have more control, more say, and I'm allowed to really like chart out the paths of my characters much more freely than if I was writing in the original trilogy era or whatever. But you're still on a team, and you have to respect that.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little more specifically about Midnight Horizon, so I'm gonna throw up the spoiler warning for anyone that hasn't finished it yet. Spoilers are incoming. Nothing too major yet, but when you were developing Midnight Horizon, did you always know you wanted the story to take place on Corellia?
Pretty early on, yeah. That was actually something that came up in a group meeting, though. I didn't know much about it. There was a period where I was just like, I don't know. Back to my earlier point, like you kind of have to wait on some stuff too, and that's really hard. Like we just hadn't fixed where it was going to be. There was a period I remember when we were thinking about it, still also being on Starlight, which I'm so glad did not happen because I was personally dreading writing a story on Starlight, given what was going to happen and everything else. I just was like, I would be claustrophobic, like writing it. Like I didn't want to do that. So I'm glad that didn't happen.
You heard what was going to happen, and you grabbed Ram and Zine and Lula, and you got them all out of there.
Come on, guys, let's go. Let's get out of here. Let's just go. Just run, you know. So I do love the idea of it just being somewhere else. It might have been Justina that brought up Corellia, but I'm not sure. You can't quote me. I mean, I can't confirm that, but it was definitely something that came up at some point. And pretty quickly, I was like, yes, that's great. I don't have to be on Starlight. Fantastic. And then I think there was some back and forth about when exactly in the timeline it would take place, But over the course of those conversations and as it started to solidify in the group a little bit, that's when I started to really hone in on like, okay, what characters am I going to grab? How are we going to do this? You know, how's it all going to work? And I do think once it was settled on Corellia, that's when things started to take off for me. I'm a very place-oriented writer. And so knowing that it was a planet that's so cool and we all love so much but have barely seen, and B, the little we've seen of it is going to be, you know, way in the future from where I'm writing. So I had a lot of room to maneuver. And one of the first things I did was sit down with Mike and Pablo and a couple other people and just have a conversation about like what Corellia would have been going through at that time. And we kind of threw ideas around and, you know, really settled on it being this golden era kind of like Detroit, like at its height, what that would
Mm.
look like industrial wise and political wise and culturally, all those different aspects. And really what it was too, though, was an open book. Like once we had established those things between us, I was like, cool, I get to make up music. I get to think about local political lore. I read Most Wanted for fun and for like threads to pull, which was really fun. But other than that, there's nothing established really. So that was like, for me, that was just like, oh great, it's an open world that I get to play in and create. And I did.
Oh, I thought, yeah, you used everything that has been established to really great effect, especially the Grindelids, where someone
Yeah.
who, when I first saw Lady Proxima and Solo, I was like, I don't know about how I feel about this, but I really loved the Grindelids in this book,
Me
and
too.
they had a moment that like just my jaw dropped when it happened. Uh,
Wait, which one?
uh, the someone's death, I'll just say that,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh good,
where
yeah.
I was just like, oh my god.
That's great.
I great moment.
Yes.
But I also love the decision to place the story on a core world
Right.
so far from Starlight Beacon while it's falling apart. I loved exploring what the core citizens think of the Outer Rim and the Nile,
Totally.
and just that they don't really care about their struggles. And I'm wondering, do any Corellians or people in the core, do any of them really mean it when they say we are all the Republic? Or do they mean like just the core? There's a lot of elitism going on
There was
there.
a lot of elitism, and the Jedi are very aware of that too. Or the Jedi we know and love, like showing up like these guys don't care about us. Like what's going on? So that was definitely that's a piece of it. I do think if you really got into it and like started talking to like Spino's family, they would be like, yeah, this affects us. Like here we are on the front lines of this battle because we're the ones that have to deal with it, and those elite guys up in the fancy hotel having their little soiree with their little Nile masks, they're the problem.
Mhm.
So I think there's different dynamics within the core worlds for sure. But yeah, I was trying to touch on that. It's also like trying to get at the idea of this underworld activity happening, but in a very enfranchised way, right? Like it's like all this local politics is going on, and it's extraordinarily corrupt, but it's all above the level corrupt. It's like corrupt, but like
Right.
with all just like on the table, and everyone knows it's a mess. And it was cool to sort of think about like what did the Grindelids crime family look like before they were a crime family, right? When they were legitimate business worms and trying to figure out their political connections and knowing that it all goes downhill at a certain point and literally underground. And what does that look like?
But I really loved kind of the pyramid of elitism where, yeah, a lot of Corellians don't really think much of the Outer Rim or care. And then when you get to Corellia itself, there's elitism there as well, where
Yeah,
it's like if you're elitist about one thing, you're going to be elitist about something else. And some
totally.
Corellians are like looking down their nose at their own moon, and the
Right,
workers over there, they're like, we don't care about their strike or
right.
whatever. Like they're all the way over there.
Yeah. Yep. All of that. Yeah, that was what was really fun to play with. And just having a character like Crash was so important because she just touches on all levels of society. In some ways, it was inspired by being a paramedic because when you're a medic, right, like you are literally in the train tunnels and you are literally in the high rises and in the court systems and the hospitals and everywhere else. You're just all across society, and it's similar as a bodyguard. You have to be able to have access to everywhere, and you have to know people, and you have to be able to like get what you need done and everything else. So there's kind of an underworld aspect to her, and she's a sort of a fixer on a lot of levels. And so that makes her the perfect guide for us and for the Jedi through that world.
Well, one of my favorite things to see in stories is two best friends becoming best friends.
Yeah.
Finn and Poe, that's like one of my favorite scenes when they're escaping the Star Destroyer.
Yes.
What was the most fun aspect of writing Ram and Reath together and all of their shenanigans?
It was that. It was like, no, I knew immediately that they would just hit it off. Like that was just clear to me from reading Reath and writing Ram. I was like, these two are going to be best friends. We just have to get them in the same place at the same time and let them have at it. And I think what surprised me about it in the best way was that their friendship, these two kind of serious but also goofy boys, I guess. The place that they connect on is being just really goofy and like really just like having fun and messing with each other. And I wanted to show that. It sort of came up naturally as I was writing them. Like that first moment when Ram force shoves him and he's like, oh, we're doing that. Like, oh, all right. And like, I think it really breaks all the barriers. Like Reath is like, I'm this good kid and I'm like really studying and I'm trying to be whatever I need to be and all this stuff. And then Ram comes along and just like breaks all the rules and they immediately just have at it, just like realize that they have a kindred spirit in one another. And that allows them, I think, to then open up when they need to and become vulnerable, in those really intense and dark moments when things are going to hell around them and they have to, emotionally ground themselves to be able to do the physical action that needs to be done to survive and to help their friends. And dress up as assassins. Let's not forget that.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know where that came from, but I'm so happy it showed up, and I got to just like have Ram have that moment where the woman is like, "I thought that you cut out your own tongues," and he's like, "What makes you think this is my tongue?"
The assassin thing was super fun. Them getting into like a bar fight, all of the Jedi was super fun. Yeah. Seeing Jedi in a bar fight is a blast.
Right.
Having them kind of just walking through it all, not getting hit by anything. I thought that was such a fun scene.
I forgot about that scene.
And you brought up Crash, and she is based off of Crash Wong, Alyssa Wong, who writes the wonderful Dr. Aphra comics.
Yes.
Have you been working closely together? Because she has made several references to the High Republic and even the battle from the High Republic Adventures issue 12, I think.
Yeah, that was Alyssa started that just by writing Aphra and Aphra being an archaeologist, and that was all Alyssa. And then I was like, "Ooh, I wonder if I can jump in on it." And we are friends, so I would text them and back and forth and blah blah blah. And then I was like, "Do you have any plans for that planet Dollar Hide, or can I borrow that?" And then they were like, "Yeah, whatever." So I threw it into the comics as the place where this big showdown happens. And that kind of made it all click. And so, yeah, we just go back and forth about stuff, but it's not super coordinated. It's very loosely like, "Oh, let me try that. Oh, you're going to do that? You need anything with that?" Just like, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I do have one more big old question.
Take your time. I'm having fun.
Okay, great. Well, Yoda's return kicks so much ass. And again, I don't really have a question about that, but I'd love to talk about it because I
would love to talk about it too. So
it was so Two Towers. It was so Gandalf like coming back in to save everybody at Helm's Deep. I loved it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I'm glad. Did you not see it coming?
Not really. I was thinking that maybe he would show up on like the last couple pages,
right?
Just because there was so much between Yoda and Kantam, and the story that Kantam was telling. That I was like, that seems like maybe Yoda could make his way back in, but I was not expecting to come in and save the day like he did.
Yeah, in my head it was always like a reverse Rogue One moment where you would see the lightsaber open up in the mist and in the Nile fog, and it'd be the green lightsaber, and it was like, oh, it'd be cinematically. That's how I always pictured it. And then the Luke moment happened on The Mandalorian, which was that. And I was like, well, okay, that's already been done. It's a green lightsaber, so cool. So I kind of let that image go and just leaned into, all the other narrative aspects that were happening. But that was one of the few things I knew. That was one of the first things, if not the first thing I knew about the book, was that Yoda would come back and just be incredibly badass, and it would be this gigantic triumphant moment where he just whooped everyone's ass and like showed up, and you're like, oh my God. On the other hand, I wanted the crew to not be totally lost, right? Like I wanted them to be still making a go at it. And that's why you have Kantam like just desperately trying to hold on to the escaping cruiser while they're being charged by a whole other team of Nile. And that's also, you're absolutely right that's why so many of those Kantam moments involve Yoda being Kantam's master. It wouldn't have worked as well if obviously everyone knows who Yoda is, right? But I wanted Yoda to be also like a palpable presence in the book, even in his absence. And so it was important to really get those different moments emotionally of, who he was to different folks and what that meant. And particularly, I think we don't get to see Yoda, speaking of emotions, we don't get to see Yoda emote much beyond in like how he feels about the galaxy overall, the Republic or whatever. But really that moment of him being like, that was hard for me too when you left, Kantam. Like, I think it was easy, like having to sort of demonstrate like letting go, even though you feel a way about it and you don't want to let go of a person, but it's the right thing for them. For me, that was a really big Yoda moment to kind of get in there. And then really brought home when he shows up again, like emotionally, how much it matters. On top of the fact that he goes ahead and drops a spaceship on a bunch of Nile too.
I'm glad you bring up Kantam again, because their story was so cool to see, and just the idea that this Jedi left for a year so they could love someone else, and then very very much like a prodigal child story.
Right.
They're accepted back with open arms, and
Mhm.
so many times I read something in these High Republic stories where I'm just like, if Anakin were born here, like he would have thrived.
Yeah, and I'll hasten to point out, it may have been more than a year. We don't actually track how long Kantam was gone, but in my head, it was a good chunk of time. In part because I would really love another writer, preferably non-binary writer, to come in and just tell some Kantam stories in that
Mhm.
interim period. It would be so cool to see. So I wanted to leave it very open, and the idea being like, Kantam is so centered and balanced. Like, we know them in this era where they really just achieved a level of balance, I think, in the Force and in their path as a Jedi, that they just have it together, more so than Comac, for instance. and
Yeah.
and no shade to Comac, I love him obviously, but they're just very different. And so I wanted to show Kantam in their wild youth, like really just being chaotic Kantam, and that was really fun. But also, I will say, like, I gave myself permission with that whole section to not have any idea what was going to happen or where it would lead. So I started writing it. I knew it was going to be totally disconnected plot wise from everything else. So I had the luxury of being able to do that. Everything else was pretty much charted out, sometimes very meticulously, like really architected out. But with Kantam's backstory, I had no idea, and I really went into it like, we'll find out. And every time I would get to one of those chapters, I'd be like, we'll find out. Let's see where it goes. And we would just go. And even I thought that love story was going to be the whole thing. And then I was very surprised when 3 sections in, suddenly Kantam's like, all right, see you later. And the guy's like, cool, see you later. And they just have this very nice like split, right? So I just didn't know. And to the point that I got to the very end of it, the beat before where it lands, and I was like, I don't know what is going to bring Kantam back to the order. Like, nothing felt right. I literally went to Britt, my wife, and I was like, babe, like, I don't know. I wrote all the way here and I have no idea. Like, I had to take a walk. I had to think about it. Mind you, I was on a deadline. But I was like, it'll come to me. And what came made so much sense, and it was almost like it was there all along. Like,
It really did. Like, I'm surprised that
me too.
that wasn't the plan, because that worked so well. I loved
It was
Lula's.
beautiful. It was really sad. I was definitely crying when I wrote it. I was like, the baby, the little baby. But it totally made sense, and it tied into all this other stuff that was happening thematically so well. So it was really gratifying to like take that risk and kind of walk out onto that ledge and keep walking and be like, and then there it was.
It's always wild to hear just the storytelling process and how it changes, and that is terrifying. That sounds terrifying.
It was fun. Like I said, the deadline made it scary, but I knew there wasn't not gonna be an answer. You know what I mean? Like, there was no way I was gonna get there and just not have an answer. So it was just a matter of making sure I had enough time to figure out one that really worked, and I did.
I'm a very meticulous and like planning kind of person, so that would kill me, I think.
I've become more of that. I didn't used to be that, but I've become more of that in the past couple of books. So that's also why I was like jarring a little bit, because it was kind of going back to my old ways. Excuse me. But yeah, I had no idea. But also the happy board moment. It's just one of my favorite moments of the book. Just that we get this totally off the side moment with Yoda, like helping a happy board give birth, and like multiple happy board babies popping out, and Yoda, right, totally. Like, I just wanted to show Yoda get like thrown by something, and I was like, it's got to be really bad for Yoda to not have a full grasp on the situation. It has to just escalate and also be like, it'll probably be all right. But it was to the point that scene made no sense in a way, because there's no Yoda POV, and it's literally in Kantam's memory. Like, Kantam is telling the story, and then suddenly it's a scene with Yoda telling a story that Kantam is not present for because Kantam shows up late in the game in it. And then finally, and the editors were like, this doesn't quite make sense, right? I was like, look, this moment has to be there. Like, I know it doesn't make sense, but I don't care. And finally, it kind of like, I curved it into the idea that Kantam is telling the story of Yoda. Or Yoda told the story to Kantam, and that's kind of how we get sort of like a story within a story. But all that to say, I was committed to that moment happening, and I didn't really care if it made sense or
not. That it didn't make me think twice. I thought it was fine. It made perfect sense to me.
What are you gonna do?
Well, is there anything else you wanted to bring up about Midnight Horizon before we get into our final couple questions?
Man, I just had so much fun writing it. Like, it's been so thrilling to see the reaction and how positive it's been already. Like, it's weird. It's a book that this isn't true of most of my books. Most of my books, and I love them all equally. But but most of them I kind of like finish them and I put them down and I'm proud of them and I keep it moving. But Midnight Horizon is a book that has really stuck with me in a way that I just like. I'll return to it in my head. It's like a happy place for me. Like, I'll just be like, man, remember that time when Ram would like jumped into that weird force starship and like blew out a whole other ship out of the sky with the drill. Like, I just go back to moments throughout the book that I've forgotten about it. Like, oh man, that was wild. It's like I lived it. And so it's very personal to me in that sense. And so it's just been like just really, really exciting mostly. Like ego, it's not about ego. It's really just like so cool to now have people sharing that experience and like enjoying it like I did in a way and like sharing it with each other and just seeing people get excited. It hasn't even come out yet in this time zone. And like seeing people be excited and just like join with me in that excitement. So it's been really cool.
It was great. Right when I finished it, I grabbed my wife and I was like, we got to go on a walk. And I just got to like word vomit at you about.
Oh, that's awesome. Happened. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. When a book makes you physically want to do something, like that's so great. That was Snow Crash for me, the Neil Stephenson book.
I've read that.
Yeah, when I think I read it, I was like 12 or 13. And I viscerally, physically remember the feeling of having to move my body when I was done with it because it was so awesome. And I was like, that was so awesome. Like, I just have to run. Like, it's great. Yeah, it's great.
Well, I know that you can't talk about phase 2, but can you remind everyone what you're writing first, since that was already announced on the High Republic show?
Sure. I am writing an original graphic novel that is in this. It's a High Republic Adventures graphic novel, so it's a full-length graphic novel for all ages, and it's really good.
Well, I can't wait to get into phase 2. I'm really bummed we have to wait 8 months, 9 months. It's too long, frankly.
I agree.
And also, but I will say Midnight Horizon got me really psyched up for the time jump.
Good. That's good. Back. That's really good. I was kind of worried with all the loose ends that we have that it would make people feel the anxiousness to skip over phase 2 and be like, no, I just need answers about what happened to X, Y, and Z. But like, there's some of those answers in a way are behind us. So
exactly. That's the way that you end that and kind of ease us into phase 2. I was like, that was really great because I had definitely was like, how can you do all this stuff in wave 3 and then make us wait until phase 3 to get to it? But I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Me too. I'm very excited too. You guys should all know that we are all very excited.
I think you've earned everyone's trust that you're telling the story.
And that's what it's about. It is really all about trust. And I think it was such a bold move. And I say that it sounds arrogant, but we collectively made the choice. I don't think any one or another of us really feels like they take credit for that. I don't know. It might have been Mike. I don't remember who it was that was like, we got to go back in time for phase 2. It's been part of this since the beginning, I think. So I'm comfortable in saying, without sounding super arrogant, that I think it's a really interesting and bold narrative choice that we're doing. But you're right. It absolutely requires people to be on board with us. And it's a very delicate kind of tightrope to walk, to be like, we want you to care about these characters enough that you really are invested and want to know what happens to them, but also like care about the larger story enough that you're willing to take some time to go back into the lore and figure out what the history is.
Yeah, I think you're really striking that balance well as a Star Wars nerd who, yeah, is loving the characters, but also loves to get into just the history of the galaxy. So
Totally. Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
well, where can people follow you online? And if they enjoyed Midnight Horizon, what of your non-Star Wars work would you suggest they check out?
Cool. So online, I'm on Twitter. I'm at DJ Older. On Instagram, I'm at Daniel Jose One, and on TikTok, I'm at Daniel Jose Older. Um, my next YA book is called Ballad and Dagger, and it is, if you like Midnight Horizon, you will definitely love Ballad and Dagger. It's an urban fantasy, and it comes out from Rick Riordan Presents, which is Rick Riordan's imprint, also from Disney Books. And I'm just really excited about it. It's a book that is very close to my heart. I love it deeply. There's pirates and demons and saints and true love.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me for the third time. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and may the force be with you all.
For light and life.